Greetings, gentlemen. In today's video, I wanted to expand on the other videos that I've made about red pill knowledge and how it applies to different sort of manosphere topics. I've talked about how I believe you can separate red pill knowledge in the manosphere into two sort of categories or two kind of separate red pills. And that kind of explains a lot of what you see kind of within the different subgroups within the men's community. You have this sort of knowledge about male versus female nature and how we are not really taught the truth about some of the negative aspects of female nature and how women are not generally willing to compromise. They think with their emotions, they feel rather than think. Those are just a few of the potential negative traits that women can have, but basically realizing that men and women are very different from one another and have different goals and needs, and we're not interchangeable and equal in that sense, at least, despite what we're taught from the time that we're young. And then you have the other sort of category of red pill knowledge, or at least in my sort of thinking, it's another category of men's position in society, right? You have basically the reality of long-term relationships and marriages being a really negative experience in general for men today because of the way that the laws and the culture are and how women have the upper hand when it comes to the whole family dynamic. And when you take those two ideas, when you realize that you can't really reason with women the way that you can reason with some men, at least, that women, they feel entitled to having it all because they feel like they deserve that. And it's very hard to get your average woman to break away from that mindset. But then on the other hand, women already have the power, right? They're not, as we are taught from, again, the time that we're young, that they're victims of the patriarchy and that they can do everything a man can do and all this. Women will go along with this whole special but equal yet victim way of thinking because, again, they feel rather than think, but then they already have the upper hand when it comes to child custody and reproductive rights, despite some of the recent ongoings with that, right? Men basically don't have reproductive rights. When it comes to gender roles, women typically expect men to be providers and protectors, but they don't expect to do anything in return for that because that's sexist. When you understand female nature and some of the sort of less positive aspects of female nature, and then you see where things are for men in society, you can kind of put two and two together on that, and you're a lot more likely to be MGTOW, or have a sort of MGTOW-ish way of thinking at the very least. Whereas if you only understand part of that, you can understand male and female nature, but be in denial more or less about man's position in society, you're probably going to be like a traditional conservative, because you're going to look at this and say, well, men just need to man up somehow. And if you believe that women don't have the upper hand in relationships, then you're more likely to go along with that. On the other hand, if you don't understand the differences between male and female nature, but you see that women have the upper hand when it comes to long-term relationships and marriages, you're more likely to be an MRA or some form of anti-feminist because you're going to try to change women's minds, right? You're going to want to try to change society, even though our society is basically controlled by women already and by feminine type of thinking already. But when you understand both of those sets of knowledge, you're more likely to just say, you know what, we're not going to reform things, and so I'm just going to essentially find my own path in life and not try to go through this uphill battle of having a family. What I want to talk about today is the acceptance red pill. And this stems from the idea or sort of the understanding of what a lot of men have talked about, where they tried to do everything right in the relationship. They didn't cheat, they weren't abusive, they did everything that was major and supposedly important based on what women want. They did all that right, and the woman cheated on him and took the kids anyway, or made false accusations that a lot of people believed anyway. It really didn't help. And so what I've noticed is that men can be generally aware of some of the stuff that I've mentioned, the negative aspects of female nature, along with how disadvantageous long-term relationships can be for men today. But in synthesizing these ideas at the personal level, the acceptance red pill, which is what I'll call this, requires one to acknowledge that nice guys really do finish last in this dynamic today, and that acting nice or just trying to do everything right in a relationship so that the woman will stay with you, or so that if you just find the supposedly right woman, the relationship will continue to work. This is not effective protection from the likelihood of getting screwed over in a marriage or in conventional relationships today. It's the realization that the situation for men, taken generally, applies to you as the individual guy as well. So you're not making yourself somehow an exception by being a nice guy or doing things the quote right way with a woman in a relationship. In fact, you're probably making yourself more vulnerable as a target for false accusers or gold diggers by showing that you may be an easy target for them. This is also true for other forms of connection that you may establish. So it's not just with women, but it is especially true with women because women have an easier time just getting away with whatever they do and blaming the man for it, right? A woman can be flat out abusive and cheat on you and whatnot, and a lot of people will still think that it's still partially your fault as the man, and it's like 50% your fault anyway, at best, or, it's all your fault. It's very difficult to get people to really hold women accountable because our society is so obsessed with allowing women to have a way out and giving them a pussy pass, more or less, almost no matter what they do, unless it's just so undeniably crazy. And even then, there are going to be people that try to make excuses for her in that situation. So the point, guys, is that being a nice guy can be an okay thing to do, right? I'm not trying to say that you should be an asshole either. What I'm saying is that being nice and treating other people well only works around other people with good intentions. Behaving this way or acting in this way can have good outcomes when the people that you're dealing with are willing to treat you well in return. However, trying to be nice to people who want to treat you like shit isn't going to be a good strategy and isn't going to have a positive result, for you at least. This sort of strategy, when people don't have good intentions, or when people have the sort of power, as women do in long-term relationships, to really just make you miserable or to cause suffering for you because they decide that they're going to end the relationship whenever they want, this just allows those people to manipulate you in these situations, especially, as I've said, that when it applies to women, because they can make you out to be the bad guy anyway. Once your usefulness to them is no longer necessary, or they replace you with someone else, or your time with them has expired from their point of view, it doesn't matter how nice of a guy you were up to that point. Our society today, being so female-centric and obsessed with pleasing women, it'll just say that, well, it was your fault anyway. She can just say that you're a bad guy anyway, and a lot of people will just take her word for it. And it doesn't really matter how well you tried to treat her up until that point, because the culture is so much on her side that she can just turn things around almost whenever she wants to and blame you for her cheating or for her being deserving of primary custody or sole custody of the children or anything along those lines. She can just basically on a dime decide that she's going to change her strategy, and then all the investment that you made for all those years trying to do right by her and treat her well, it can mean nothing pretty quickly once she decides that she wants to ruin your reputation and make it out to be like you were an asshole the whole time anyway. Again, I've heard so many men talk about this over the years within the men's community that, no one's perfect and everybody can say or do the wrong thing at a given point in time, but a lot of these guys, they didn't cheat, they didn't lie, they tried to buy the woman a house and allow the woman to maybe not work or just work a part-time job and just sort of like try to take care of the family and play into that nice guy provider protector role. And then she just decided that she was going to pull the carpet out from under him anyway. She decided to divorce him and take his stuff anyway. And it's just not a good proposition. So again, as a man, you are really only valued for what you can do for others. And no matter how nice of a guy you try to be, there isn't much you can do to change this. This is just the way that society sees men. And it's unfortunate, and it would be nice if someday this weren't the case. But you are basically valued for what you can do for others. You will often be labeled as bad just for not letting other people, and particularly women, have access to your time and resources. But if you're a complete jerk, yet somehow useful to women in society with what you do, you may actually be treated better than if you're a nice guy who doesn't allow, or maybe not necessarily a nice guy because you're not allowing people to take advantage of you, but someone who tries to treat other people well, but is not willing to give your time and resources, or don't have time and resources to give to others, and particularly for women. You're going to get treated worse in a lot of cases than the asshole who has something to offer, because that's really how men are measured, unfortunately. So this is a losing proposition either way, and it's advisable to reject acting as the nice guy or as the asshole consistently. Instead, I think focusing on your own path while being realistic about relationships and how you're portrayed by others is probably the advisable strategy to have. In other words, you can be nice to people if they're willing to be nice to you, but you've also got to be willing to deal as the asshole when that's necessary. And essentially, you just try to make the best decisions for yourself to make yourself into a better person. You know what your morals are, you know what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and you don't allow people to walk all over you, but you're not really an asshole all the time either. You tailor things, or you do things based on what is the right thing to do in a given situation. But being a nice guy and thinking that that's going to give you protection in a relationship, in my view, is not the way to go, because it doesn't work out. It doesn't actually get you anything in the long run. So to conclude this sort of acceptance red pill video, my sort of take on this is to try not to don the nice guy armor, so to speak, thinking that you're going to be the exception and will somehow make a relationship work by just being a good husband and boyfriend and treating your partner as best you can and giving her what she says that she wants, and just trying to do whatever you can to make the relationship work. Many men who have thought this way and tried to do all of this ended up in a divorce, or having false accusations made against them, or getting cheated on, or worse, where they ended up ending themselves, even though they tried to do everything supposedly the right way. Doing an honest cost-benefit analysis based on the goals that you want to achieve in the environment that we actually find ourselves in is the best strategy, in my opinion. A lot of guys have learned the hard way and have talked about how they've had these experiences and how being a nice guy didn't help them, trying to make the relationship work by just giving their partner everything they said they wanted didn't help them. And then you also see guys that they understand the other aspects of what we could call the red pill, right? They understand the negative aspects of female nature. They understand that men are at a severe disadvantage when it comes to long-term relationships and marriage. And I understand that if you value having a family above everything else combined, like everything else combined to you doesn't mean as much as trying to have a wife and children, then I can understand you not choosing a MGTOW type of path and just doing everything you can to protect yourself, but realizing the great risk that you're taking just so that you can sort of try to have kids, because that's really the only thing that motivates you. I can understand that, but I don't think most guys fit into that category. And so if you're a guy that thinks, well, I want to have other goals in life and other things are important to me, but maybe if I just do things the right way with the right woman, that things will work out. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Everything that I've seen from my own personal experiences, to some extent at least with my ex-girlfriend, when I tried to get back together with her around 2011 and 2012, that was my mindset, right? I was going to make things work no matter what. It had no chance of happening for a variety of reasons, but mostly because that's not what makes a relationship work, right? Women know that they have the upper hand when it comes to that. And so they will let you be a nice guy, and they will let you put all this effort and provision into them and the kids that they have, and then they'll just leave you anyway, because there's nothing that requires her to treat you well in return, and being nice only works when the other person is also being nice to you and is basically, if not required, but at least expected to do that. But nothing is expected of women today in long-term relationships and marriages. And so do not don the nice guy armor. Do not think that that gives you protection and that will give you a better chance of defying the statistics and not being in a relationship that ends in divorce or that ends with the whole happy wife, happy life, I have to do whatever the woman wants or she'll kick me out of the home type of thing, you're going to find yourself in those kinds of situations anyway. And so trying to be the nice guy as a strategy to counteract where things are in society between men and women is a failing strategy, in my opinion. And I think that we're better off looking at things for what they really are and the environment that we actually find ourselves in as men, and not just being a nice guy and thinking that that's going to make long-term relationships plausible, when in reality it's still just a terrible deal for men, no matter what kind of guy you try to be. And for most men, I think we're better off just not being in those kinds of long-term committed relationships that could lead to marriage and children to begin with. Being a nice guy does not give you any protection in doing this, and it is not a good strategy, in my opinion, for trying to make a relationship work. That's not going to help you, and you're better off either just going your own way, or at the very least realizing that you're putting yourself in a negative situation and there's a good chance that it's not going to end well, and having a fallback plan, even if you have to have children, and even if getting married is so important to you that you're going to do it anyway.